What if I told you there are places in the state of New York, the same state where a studio apartment in Manhattan rents for $3,500 a month and a parking garage in Brooklyn charges more annually than a house costs in the western half of the state, where you can buy a home for less than a semester of community college tuition, where entire villages sit crumbling along roads that lead nowhere, and where the listing prices are so absurdly low that your first instinct is to check whether the decimal point is in the wrong place. So subscribe and let's start. Number 10, Tahawus, Essex County. Let me start with a town that was abandoned not once, but twice, because apparently humans have a hard time accepting that some places don't want to be lived in. Tahawus, also known as Adirondack, with no K at the end, is because 19th century cartographers apparently couldn't be bothered, sits in the heart of the Adirondack Mountains in Essex County, surrounded by some of the most spectacular wilderness in the eastern United States. Iron ore was discovered here in 1826 by David Henderson and Archibald McIntyre, who immediately did what any reasonable person would do upon finding valuable minerals in the middle of a pristine forest. They started digging. The Adirondack Iron Works operated from 1827 to 1857, but the titanium dioxide mixed with the iron ore made it nearly impossible to smelt properly using the technology of the era. The operation failed, the workers left, and the forest started reclaiming the settlement. Then came the second act. In 1940, National Lead Industries discovered that the titanium dioxide everyone had been cursing for a century was actually the valuable part, titanium being crucial for everything from paint to aerospace. The mines reopened and a new company town called Tahawus sprang up with hundreds of residents, homes, a school, a store, and all the infrastructure of a functional community. When titanium mining operations terminated in 1989, the town was abandoned for the second and presumably final time. The entire community walked away, leaving behind approximately 10 buildings, most constructed by the Tahawus Club between 1890 and 1930. There's also the original McIntyre furnace from 1854, a relic of the first failed mining attempt. In 2003, a Governor George Pataki opened public access to the Tahawus Tract, and the lands are now managed by the Adirondack Park Agency for hiking and recreation. You cannot buy property in Tahawus. It's state-managed land within the Adirondack Park. But Essex County, which encompasses both the High Peaks Wilderness and the more settled communities along Lake Champlain, presents a fascinating real estate split. The tourist-facing towns like Lake Placid and Keene command prices of $300,000 to over $1 million, inflated by the vacation home market and the two-time Winter Olympics cachet. Move away from the tourist corridor, however, and into the communities that time and tourism forgot. Minerva, Newcomb, Crown Point, Moriah, and the numbers shift dramatically. In these towns, our older homes and fixer-uppers can be found for $40,000 to $80,000. Some distressed properties in the most remote corners trade for under $25,000. The Adirondack Park's strict land use regulations limit development, which keeps prices lower in areas without lake or mountain views, but also means you can't simply subdivide and sell. The property taxes, however, are a different story. New York State property taxes are among the highest in the nation, and even a cheap house in Essex County can carry an annual tax bill of $2,000 to $4,000. A jarring reality for anyone accustomed to the $300 annual bills in Appalachian coal country. Number 9, Doodletown, Rockland County. The name sounds like something a toddler invented. But Doodletown was a real community in Rockland County that lasted over 2 centuries before being systematically erased by the Palisades Interstate Park Commission, located in a valley tucked into a crescent of land that curves southeast from Bear Mountain to the Hudson River. Doodletown was first settled in the 1760s. The earliest residents worked as loggers and miners, and over the following 2 centuries, the community grew into a tight-knit hamlet of approximately 70 homes with families that traced their roots back generations. The beginning of the end came in the 1950s when the Palisades Interstate Park Commission began acquiring land in the area to expand Bear Mountain State Park. The commission's plan was to build ski slopes on the surrounding hillsides, and Doodletown was in the way. Over the following decade, properties were purchased, sometimes willingly, sometimes less so, and residents were relocated. The last families departed in 1965. The ski slopes were never built. Doodletown was destroyed for a recreational development that never happened, which is the kind of governmental efficiency that makes you want to set fire to a filing cabinet. The schoolhouse was vandalized and demolished in 1980. Today, hikers on the Doodletown Trail in Bear Mountain State Park can walk the old roads, find concrete stairs that mark where houses once stood, discover stone foundations being slowly consumed by the forest, and visit the cemetery, which is the only part of Doodletown that continues to grow, not with new burials, but with the persistent advance of vegetation through the headstones. The settlement has become a popular destination for hikers, birdwatchers, and local historians who appreciate the quiet irony of a community destroyed by a park commission that then preserved the ruins as a historical curiosity. You cannot buy property in Doodletown, but Rockland County, despite being only 45 miles north of Manhattan, has pockets of surprising affordability. While the county's median home price hovers around $400,000, influenced heavily by the commuter communities closest to New York City, the northwestern reaches, closer to Harriman State Park and the Orange County border, offer more accessible options. And if you're willing to cross into adjacent Orange or Sullivan counties, the prices drop further. See, in the rural communities of western Sullivan County, particularly around the former Borscht Belt resort towns, the market bottoms out in ways that few New Yorkers would believe possible. But we'll get to that. Number 8, Parksville, Sullivan County. Parksville is not technically a ghost town. A few hundred people still live there, which technically makes it an inhabited community. But walking through the main street of Parksville feels like stepping into a photograph from the 1960s that someone forgot to put away. Abandoned pharmacies, shuttered diners, empty storefronts with faded signs, advertising products that haven't been manufactured in decades. Parksville is the kind of place where time didn't stop so much as it gave up and went somewhere more interesting. The town traces its origins to the pioneer era, while some settlers pushed across the New England region and into the Catskill foothills. Parksville boomed at the turn of the 20th century when the Ontario and Western Railway arrived, connecting the Catskill region to New York City and bringing an influx of vacationers, particularly from the Jewish communities of the Lower East Side and Brooklyn. This was the beginning of the Borscht Belt, the legendary constellation of hotels, resorts, and bungalow colonies that made Sullivan County the summer playground of New York's Jewish middle class. More than 100 hotels and resorts were built in and around Parksville, and for decades, the town thrived on the seasonal tourist economy. The Great Depression closed many of the original hotels. Air travel killed many more. Why drive to the Catskills when you could fly to Miami or Puerto Rico? By the late 20th century, the Borscht Belt was dead, and the towns that had depended on it were dying with it. Parksville's Main Street, once lined with active businesses serving thousands of summer visitors, became a corridor of decay. The railway is gone. The hotels are gone. What remains are the buildings, stubbornly standing, while everything inside them has been hollowed out. Sullivan County is one of the cheapest places to buy property within reasonable commuting distance of New York City. The county seat, Monticello, has seen some renewal thanks to the resort's World Catskills Casino, but the smaller communities, Parksville, Livingston Manor, Roscoe, Jeffersonville, remain deeply affordable. Homes in the rural stretches of Sullivan County regularly list for $50,000 to $100,000. Distressed properties and fixer-uppers can be found for $15,000 to $30,000. Some abandoned commercial properties in former resort towns have traded for under $10,000. The county is about 90 minutes from Manhattan by car, which puts it within theoretical commuting range, though anyone who has driven Route 17 on a Friday afternoon in summer knows that theoretical and actual are two very different things. The property taxes are the catch. Sullivan County's effective tax rate, while lower than downstate counties, is still significantly higher than what you'd pay in Appalachian states. A house that costs $30,000 to buy might carry an annual tax bill of $2,000, which fundamentally changes the math of cheap home ownership. Number 7, Red House, Cattaraugus County. See, the ghost town of Red House lies within the boundaries of Allegany State Park, the largest state park in New York, covering over 65,000 acres of the southern tier near the Pennsylvania border. The community was established in 1869 and grew into a small settlement serving the logging and farming economy of western New York's hill country. When New York State began acquiring land for the park in the early 20th century, Red House's residents were gradually bought out and relocated. The town was absorbed into the park, and its buildings were either demolished or left to deteriorate. Today, the remnants of Red House are scattered through the park. Foundations, stone walls, and clearings that mark where homes and farms once stood. Allegany State Park itself is a spectacular piece of public land. With hundreds of miles of hiking trails, 3 lakes, and some of the darkest night skies in the northeastern United States, the park is also adjacent to the Allegany Reservation of the Seneca Nation, whose presence in the area predates European settlement by centuries. Cattaraugus County, which encompasses both the state park and the surrounding rural communities, is among the cheapest counties in western New York. The median home price in the county hovers around $90,000 to $110,000, but in the more remote communities, Franklinville, Ellicottville's outskirts, Little Valley, Salamanca, prices dip considerably. Older homes in need of renovation can be found for $25,000 to $50,000. Some distressed properties trade for under $15,000. The county's economy is driven by a combination of tourism, agriculture, and the Seneca Nation's casino operations in Salamanca. Employment outside these sectors is limited, and the population has been declining steadily. The county lost over 10% of its residents between 2000 and 2020, but the Allegany River runs through it. The forests are magnificent, and a house with mountain views costs less than a month's rent in most neighborhoods of Brooklyn. Number 6, Jayville, St. Lawrence County. Jayville is what happens when a railroad moves and a town doesn't. Located in St. Lawrence County in the far northern reaches of New York, near the Canadian border, Jayville was a small community that grew up around a railroad stop, serving the logging industry and local farms. The railroad brought commerce. The commerce brought people, and for a brief period, Jayville had the ingredients of a viable settlement, a station, homes, businesses, and the expectation that the future would be at least as good as the present. When the railroad discontinued service and the logging economy contracted, those ingredients evaporated. The population dwindled, the businesses closed, the homes were abandoned. Today, All that remains of Jayville are the abandoned railroad station and a few foundations along Jayville Road. The land is now owned by the state of New York. St. Lawrence County is the largest county in New York by area, over 2,800 square miles of forests, farms, and rivers in the northernmost corner of the state. It's also one of the most affordable. The county seat, Canton, is home to two colleges, St. Lawrence University and SUNY Canton, which provide a degree of economic stability. But the communities beyond the college towns are deeply rural and aging rapidly. In places like Gouverneur, Star Lake, Cranberry Lake, and the communities along the Indian River, homes list for $40,000 to $70,000. In the most distressed areas, properties have been listed for under $20,000. Land prices in northern St. Lawrence County, near the Adirondack Park border, can drop to under $2,000 per acre for large, remote parcels. The winters are brutal. Average snowfall exceeds 100 inches in some areas. The nearest major city, Ottawa, is in a different country, but the St. Lawrence River, the Adirondack Wilderness, and the cost of entry make the region one of the most undervalued in the entire Northeast. Number 5, Kensico, Westchester County. Kensico is underwater, not metaphorically, literally beneath the surface of Kensico Reservoir, one of the critical components of New York City's water supply system. The village got its name from Kensico, a chief of the Siwanoy people, and began as a settlement in the 1800s that grew into a modest community with homes, businesses, and the kind of Main Street infrastructure that characterized small Hudson Valley towns. Then New York City got thirsty. In the early 20th century, the city's Board of Water Supply identified the Kensico Valley as an ideal location for a storage reservoir. The village was condemned, the residents were relocated, and the entire community was demolished to make way for the dam and reservoir that would help supply drinking water to millions of New Yorkers. By 1917, the village of Kensico was gone, drowned beneath the rising waters of the reservoir that bears its name. Subscribe to show that these videos actually help and make sense. Today, Kensico Reservoir covers roughly 307 acres and holds roughly 30 billion gallons of water that flows through the city's aqueduct system before reaching the taps of 8 million people. Occasional low water levels have reportedly revealed glimpses of old foundations, but for the most part, Kensico exists only in historical records and in the name printed on the reservoir's maps. You obviously cannot buy property in Kensico. But the story of a village destroyed to serve New York City's infrastructure illuminates a tension that runs through the entire upstate-downstate relationship. The city's demands have repeatedly reshaped the landscape of rural and suburban New York, from reservoir construction to highway projects to conservation mandates that limit development in communities that never asked to be preserved. Westchester County itself is among the most expensive in the nation, with median home prices exceeding $600,000. But the northern reaches of the county, near the reservoirs in communities like Yorktown Heights, Putnam Valley, and across the line into Putnam County, offer somewhat more accessible options. And once you cross into the mid-Hudson Valley, the prices begin a decline that doesn't stop until you reach the Pennsylvania border. Number 4, Love Canal, Niagara County. Love Canal might be the most infamous abandoned neighborhood in American history, and it earned that distinction by being built on top of 21,000 tons of toxic chemical waste. Located in the southeastern corner of the city of Niagara Falls, Love Canal was originally a partially dug canal project abandoned in the 1890s. In the 1940s and 50s, the Hooker Chemical Company used the abandoned canal as a dump site for industrial waste, including dioxins, pesticides, and a chemical soup so toxic that it would eventually become one of the primary case studies in American environmental law. In 1953, Hooker sold the land to the Niagara Falls Board of Education for $1, along with a deed clause warning about the buried chemicals, and the board proceeded to build an elementary school directly on top of the dump site. A residential neighborhood grew up around the school. Families moved in. Children played in yards where chemical residue seeped through the soil. By the late 1970s, residents were reporting alarming rates of miscarriages, birth defects, and cancer. Investigative reporting by journalist Michael Brown and the activism of homeowner Lois Gibbs brought national attention to the crisis. In 1978, President Jimmy Carter declared a federal state of emergency, and over 800 families were eventually evacuated and relocated. Love Canal was fenced off, capped, and declared a Superfund site. The cleanup has cost hundreds of millions of dollars and continues in various forms to this day. In a controversial decision, portions of the site were declared habitable in the 1990s, and a redeveloped neighborhood called Black Creek Village was built on the periphery. But the stigma remains. The name Love Canal is synonymous with environmental catastrophe, and the area around the original dump site is still restricted. Niagara County as a whole is one of the most affordable areas in western New York. The city of Niagara Falls, once a booming industrial center and honeymoon destination, has experienced decades of population decline, economic contraction, and urban decay. Home prices in Niagara Falls proper are staggeringly low by New York State standards. You can find houses for $15,000 to $30,000 in neighborhoods that have been hollowed out by deindustrialization. Some properties have been listed for under $10,000. The tax burden is significant. Niagara Falls has one of the highest combined tax rates in the state, which means a house that costs $15,000 to buy might cost $3,000 to $4,000 per year in property taxes. That's a tax rate that effectively doubles the cost of home ownership every 4 to 5 years, which is why so many properties sit vacant. But the waterfalls are still spectacular. The state park is free, and the Canadian border is right there if you need a healthcare system that actually works. The city of Niagara Falls itself is a study in the American paradox of natural splendor coexisting with urban decay. The most powerful waterfall in North America sits adjacent to blocks of boarded-up houses, empty lots, and commercial strips that haven't seen a profitable business since the Reagan administration. The downtown is slowly being revitalized through tourism investment, but the residential neighborhoods on the east side of the city remain some of the most depressed urban areas in New York State. A house on a street where every other lot is vacant costs exactly what you'd expect. Almost nothing. The question is whether almost nothing is still too much when the property taxes alone would constitute a mortgage payment in most other states. Number 3, the Borscht Belt ruins, Sullivan County. I mentioned Parksville earlier, but it deserves to be expanded into its broader context because Sullivan County isn't just home to one ghost town, it's home to an entire ghost economy. The Borscht Belt, also known as the Jewish Alps, was a network of hotels, resorts, bungalow colonies, and entertainment venues that stretched across Sullivan and Ulster counties and served as the primary vacation destination for Jewish families from New York City from roughly the 1920s through the 1970s. At its peak, the Borscht Belt had over 500 hotels and countless smaller establishments, ranging from massive resorts like Grausinger's and the Concord to modest bungalow colonies that rented by the week. The comedians who came out of the Borscht Belt circuit, Jerry Seinfeld, Joan Rivers, Rodney Dangerfield, Mel Brooks, Woody Allen, Morris Henny Youngman, essentially invented modern American stand-up comedy. The entertainment industry owes an incalculable debt to the nightclub stages of Sullivan County, where performers honed their acts in front of demanding audiences who had paid good money for dinner and a show and expected both out to be excellent. When the Borscht Belt died, killed by affordable air travel, the desegregation of previously restricted resorts in Florida and the Caribbean, and changing vacation preferences, the infrastructure it left behind became one of the largest collections of abandoned commercial buildings in the northeastern United States. Grossinger's, which once hosted over 150,000 guests per year, sat abandoned for decades, its ballrooms rotting and its swimming pools filling with stagnant water. The Concord, a 2,500-room behemoth, was demolished in 2008 to make way for Resorts World Catskills, the casino that New York State hoped would revive the region's tourism economy. Throughout Sullivan County, the ruins of the Borscht Belt are everywhere. Abandoned hotel buildings lurk in the woods off secondary roads. Former bungalow colonies are slowly being consumed by vegetation. Swimming pools have become ponds. Dining halls have become forests. The county's population declined by over 12% between 1970 and 2010. And while the casino and some agritourism development have slowed the bleeding, the fundamental economics of Sullivan County remain challenging, but the real estate prices reflect the challenge. In the communities scattered between the ruins, White Lake, Bethel, Cochecton, Allegany, you can find homes for $40,000 to $90,000. Distressed properties throughout the county dip below $20,000. Former commercial properties, the carcasses of small hotels and resorts, have traded for shockingly low prices, though renovation costs are astronomical. The county is about 90 minutes from Manhattan by car, which puts it within commuting range for the brave or the desperate. The Catskill Mountains are beautiful. The Delaware River is gorgeous, and the ghosts of 1,000 comedians are embedded in the landscape, which means at least the haunting will be funny. Sullivan County also played host to the Woodstock Festival in 1969, not in Woodstock, which is in Ulster County, but on Max Yasgur's dairy farm near Bethel. Yes, because even the most iconic event in counterculture history couldn't get its geography right. The Bethel Woods Center for the Arts now occupies the site, offering concerts and a museum that draws visitors to a county that otherwise struggles to attract anyone who isn't already lost. Number 2, Allegany County's southern tier, Allegany County. If you drew a line across the bottom of New York State, just above the Pennsylvania border, you'd cross through a chain of counties: Cattaraugus, Allegany, Steuben, Chemung, Tioga, that collectively form one of the most affordable and least populated corridors in the Northeast. Allegany County, in the center of this chain, has a population of roughly 47,000 people spread across over 1,030 square miles of rolling hills, dairy farms, and hardwood forests. The county seat, Belmont, has fewer than 1,000 residents. The largest community, Wellsville, has about 5,000. The county's economy was historically driven by agriculture, ceramics manufacturing, and oil. The first commercially viable oil well in North America was drilled near Wellsville in 1860, predating the more famous Drake Well in Pennsylvania by 1 year. Alfred University, home to the internationally renowned New York State College of Ceramics, provides some economic and cultural ballast to an otherwise rural county, but the population has been declining for decades, and the young people who leave for college in Rochester, Buffalo, or New York City rarely come back. Home prices in Allegany County are among the lowest in New York State. The median home value hovers around $80,000 to $100,000. But in the smaller communities, Andover, Whitesville, Canazaraga, Angelica, prices dip to $30,000 to $50,000. Distressed properties regularly list for under $20,000. Some abandoned farmhouses on large lots have traded for under $10,000. The property taxes, while lower than in the downstate counties, are still New York State property taxes, which means a house that costs $15,000 to buy might carry an annual tax bill of $1,500 to $2,500. That's a cost structure that's fundamentally different from the southern states, where cheap housing also means cheap taxes. But the landscape is stunning. Rolling green hills dotted with dairy barns and stone walls, creeks running through hemlock-lined valleys, autumn foliage that rivals New England's, but without New England's prices. Alfred University's ceramics program attracts artists and craftspeople from around the world, creating a small but genuine cultural pocket in the middle of agricultural country. And the proximity to Letchworth State Park, the so-called Grand Canyon of the East, with its 600-foot deep gorge and 3 massive waterfalls on the Genesee River, gives the region a natural attraction that most similarly priced areas can only dream about. The park draws over 1 million visitors annually, which is remarkable given that it sits in one of the most overlooked corners of the state. People drive hours from Rochester, Buffalo, and Syracuse to hike the gorge trails and photograph the falls. And then they drive home without ever considering that the houses in the surrounding communities cost less than their annual car payments. The disconnect between the value of the scenery and the value of the real estate is one of the most persistent absurdities in New York State's property market, and one of the best opportunities for anyone willing to live where tourists visit but don't stay. Number 1, Hamilton County. The entire county. Hamilton County is the least populated county in New York State, with approximately 5,100 residents spread across 1,772 square miles. That works out to roughly 3 people per square mile, which is the kind of population density normally associated with Alaska or the Australian outback. Not a state that contains the most densely populated city on the continent. Hamilton County has no traffic lights. It has no McDonald's. It has no hospital. The nearest emergency room is in Speculator or Indian Lake, staffed by volunteer first responders who cover an area the size of Rhode Island. The county sits entirely within the Adirondack Park, the 6 million acre protected area that is larger than Yellowstone, Yosemite, Glacier, and Grand Canyon national parks combined. The Adirondack Park Agency's land use regulations strictly limit development, which preserves the wilderness character, but also constrains economic growth. The county's economy depends almost entirely on seasonal tourism, hunting, fishing, hiking, snowmobiling, and the second home market, which brings income during vacation season and silence the rest of the year. And Hamilton County's population has been declining for decades. The median age is 56.4 years, the highest in the state, and rising because the young people who grow up here leave for places with jobs, cell service, and the possibility of meeting someone their own age. The county is aging at nearly 3 times the rate of the state as a whole, which creates a demographic spiral. Fewer young people means fewer families, which means fewer students, which means school consolidation, which means longer bus rides, which means families with children are even less likely to move there. But the real estate is astonishing, not the vacation homes on the lakefronts. Those command premium prices driven by the second home market. The astonishing properties are the year-round homes in the communities between the lakes: Inlet, Long Lake, the Indian Lake, Speculator, Wells, Hope. In these towns, older homes and cabins can be found for $50,000 to $100,000. In the most remote areas, properties without lake access, on unpaved roads, at the end of driveways that become impassable in winter, prices drop to $15,000 to $40,000. The property taxes are moderate by New York standards, typically $1,500 to $3,000 annually. But the cost of heating a house through an Adirondack winter, where temperatures regularly drop below -20 degrees Fahrenheit and snowfall can exceed 200 inches, adds thousands to the annual cost of living. Hamilton County forces the question that all of these ghost towns and near ghost towns ultimately raise: What are you actually paying for when you buy a house? In Manhattan, you're paying for proximity to 8 million people and everything they create: jobs, culture, entertainment, opportunity. In Hamilton County, you're paying for proximity to 6 million acres of wilderness and everything it provides: silence, clean air, dark skies, forests that have been growing since before the Republic was founded. The price difference between these two things is approximately $1 million, which tells you everything you need to know about what the market values and what it doesn't. The irony of Hamilton County is that it contains some of the most valuable natural resources in the entire Northeast: pristine lakes, old growth forests, watersheds that feed rivers flowing to both the Hudson and the St. Lawrence, but none of that value translates into the property market because the Adirondack Park's regulations prevent the kind of development that would capitalize on it. You can't build a subdivision on the shore of Indian Lake. You can't clear cut a hillside for a ski resort without going through a regulatory process that would make a federal procurement officer weep with recognition. The wilderness is preserved precisely because the regulations prevent the market from doing what markets do, which is consume everything of value and move on to the next thing. This makes Hamilton County simultaneously one of the most beautiful and most economically constrained places in New York. A museum of what America looked like before the developers arrived, priced accordingly because most people want what the developers build, not what they haven't touched. New York State is losing rural residents at a rate that has accelerated in every decade since the Great Recession. The 10 most rural counties in the state collectively lost 50,000 people between 2011 and 2021, a decline rate twice as fast as the state's urban counties. Every single one of the 24 counties classified as micropolitan or rural experienced population loss during that period. Housing stock is aging. 18% of rural housing units are vacant, and the vacancy rate continues to climb as properties deteriorate faster than they can be sold or renovated. The houses are cheap because the people are leaving. The people are leaving because the jobs are gone. The hospitals are closing. The broadband is unreliable and the winters are merciless. These are not trivial obstacles, but they are also not permanent ones. Remote work is expanding the geography of employment. Satellite internet is solving the broadband problem. Telemedicine is supplementing rural health care. And the winters, well, the winters are still brutal, but they always have been. And the people who built these communities in the first place manage just fine with less technology and more whiskey. The ghost towns of New York State aren't Wild West relics with tumbleweeds and swinging saloon doors. They're mining towns in the Adirondacks, canal villages on the Potomac, resort communities in the Catskills, railroad stops in the North Country, and entire neighborhoods poisoned by industrial waste in Niagara Falls. They represent every major economic transition the state has undergone, from agriculture to industry to tourism to information, and they mark the places where each transition left someone behind. The houses that remain are cheap because nobody wants them, and nobody wants them because the economy that built them is gone. But the land, the mountains, the rivers, the forests, and the lakes are still there, unchanged by stock markets, unaffected by interest rates, indifferent to the decisions of corporate boards in distant cities. In a state where a closet-sized apartment in Manhattan costs more annually than a house costs outright in Allegany County, the math isn't complicated. The complicated part is deciding which version of New York you want to live in. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just telling you what exists. And what exists in the forgotten corners of this state is more opportunity than most people realize.